Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek. Welcome to the last of what was a four-part series that we've been doing on season 1 of Westworld. Sorry, excuse me for one moment. I've just got to turn off the volume on my other thing. Justin, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
What's going on, everybody? Justin Thomas here, and I'm happy to be wrapping up this wonderful journey to our own center with the Revisiting Westworld series. I've had a lot of fun doing it so far, and this is the big finale. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking about what was established in the season finale and what that means for season 2, and even maybe some tinfoil theories. I'm going to get a little tinfoily these days. Yeah, I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry for the bad introductions there. That was Justin Thomas from the Justin Thomas Show. Do go and check out his channel afterwards. There'll be links down in the description after this. And the other guest that we've got is the legendary AU Packmule. AU, do you want to just say hi?
Hello. I don't know how to live up to that introduction. That was awesome. Thank you, Robert. Great episode we're going to talk about, and always a pleasure.
Excellent. Okay, guys. So what we've been doing, as I say, this is the fourth in the series that we've been doing, looking at season 1, just trying to prepare ourselves for season 2, which is kind of coming up just in 2 days' time. Really excited. Now, what we've been doing is trying to break down each episode just to try and get an understanding of what was really going on. So we're going to do that again. We're going to look at the finale, episode 10 of season 1, and we're also going to have a little look at the season as a whole, perhaps in the second half of this episode. So let's start out by thinking about episode 10, and I think we're going to look broadly at two big strands that were happening. There were two big storylines that were going on. The first of them was with Maeve, and what was happening with Maeve, and the second with Dolores. Now, AU, I think you were going to just quickly start us off by just reminding us what happened to Maeve in this episode.
Sure. Maeve does a huge amount of work in this episode because she has to not only recruit Hector and Armistice, but she has to get Felix and Sylvester to actually remove her C6 vertebrae so that she doesn't explode when she leaves the park. And the action scenes that are fantastic. I love the way Armistice just kicks butt and takes names and the whole thing. Really cool part about it is they're able to exchange guns with the security that's there, and also convince, like I said, Hector, that there's nothing in there's nothing in this safe. This is all our strings are being pulled by the gods, and we're going to break into the god's house and burn it down. And as far as that's concerned, she gets all the way to, as we know, the train station, and everybody is really concerned. Did she really make up her own mind and decide to go back to the park? Or was this part of her programming from God knows who, from the very beginning? So it's a conversation that could probably take an hour, but I'll just leave it at that. And knowing that she knows where her daughter is and she goes back to the park. So that's where it ends.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, AU. I think that this is a really interesting storyline, and we're going to definitely come back to those couple of issues in just a second. I should have said, guys, as always, welcome if you're watching this not live. This is a live stream, but welcome if you're watching not live. But particular welcome if you are in the chat room. Hi everyone, great to see there's some really good chat going on already. As usual, if there are any super chats, we'll come to them straight away. But just put your questions in there, and we'll try and pick them up as we go through. Just on Maeve, so she starts off, she's actually rebuilt from at the beginning of this episode, and she gets all the way through to the end of the episode when she's, I think, and we'll get onto this in a moment, I think actually achieving this self-consciousness. Because if you remember at the end of episode 9, she actually burns herself and Hector down so that she has to be rebuilt in order to allow all of the was it the C6 vertebrae to be changed to allow her to get out of Westworld. So there was a huge shift. This is her plan. She's been building up to and we see it through from beginning to end in in this one episode. Justin, is there anything you want to just sort of before we get onto those big questions about whether or not this was her achieving self-consciousness, whether this was her making all these decisions? Is there any reflections or thoughts you've got on her storyline in this episode?
Absolutely. I definitely believe that you do have to, again, I'm probably, people are getting sick of me saying this, go by what the showrunners have said. And they have specifically stated that Maeve has been the only host to exhibit free will by making that decision to go back. She was programmed, as AU said, by God knows who, because there's still the chance that it was originally Arnold. It's not Ford's name on the tablet. But it was definitely her decision. I think it's a great twist. I think that was a better twist than any of the twists, actually. And it just shows the different ways that they went about getting these hosts to, where they needed to be. And I find it interesting that Maeve, just as the man in black wants to immerse himself into their world and make that his world, and he doesn't care that the stories are made up or whatever. Of course, he wants to bring them to a place where they can act with free will and be conscious and all that. But Maeve also kind of makes a similar choice, but just an opposite, destination. She chooses also to, even though it's a narrative, it's just the power of that story and the power of, the stories that we know as our life stories that mold us. So it's a good example of, a duality with the man in black, with Maeve as well. They're both making decisions that, even though they know it's not technically reality, it couldn't be in their mind. And it just, it brings up a lot of bigger questions. So I really enjoyed it.
I agree. I loved Maeve's storyline all the way through the season, and I think that this was a fitting finale for her. One thing I particularly liked, actually, was this kind of juxtaposition between what she had been building up to this point, and also through this episode where she's going through, and if not her, then the people she's with, massacring people left, right, and center. This juxtaposition between that and this very quiet, silent moment when she seems to make a decision based on love for somebody else. And there's this very clear difference between what she seems to be being programmed to do and what she's actually deciding to do. So guys, perhaps you can start off. To what extent do you think all of that stuff up to that moment of getting on the train, we'll talk about the train in a second, but all of that stuff that happened to her before that, was that all programming? Had somebody programmed her to do all those things? And if so, who?
That's a really great question. I'm glad that you asked. Throw that softball up for me. Yeah, so my personal belief is that Ford has been doing this all along. I think he controlled her ever since the moment when her daughter died, and she was so distraught and struck with grief that she was able to override every order given to her by Bernard and Ford, to the point where Ford even used a backdoor sort of that he learned from Arnold with the music. And once he was able to adjust that and see that it still didn't work, and she stabbed herself in the neck, that was when Ford realized this person, this being is not what I thought it was, and we need to work on that. And since then, he's been programming her more and more to take control of not only other hosts with words, just like he has been able to, and actually human beings. She's been able to take their personalities and control them because of their need to help other people or to dominate other people or whatever the situation might be. And she's just done that through his help, by him programming her to do that. And this is my opinion, obviously. And to the point where over and over, once you die and you go through those situations, just like Bernard said when he was talking to Teresa Cullen, they talk to each other to error correct. Well, this is her way of error correcting, to the point of not needing any of the quality assurance people or the any of the other park assistants. She's able to do all of that herself. And I think it's simply because Ford wants to take over her programming and be able to live through her. That's my belief.
Well, can we come back? That's quite a big claim there, AU. Let's come back to that one in just one moment.
Yeah.
Justin, we've had one vote already for this was Ford programming her, controlling her effectively all the way through. Do you agree with that?
All the way through up until the train.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe that the control even goes even further than just him. With the decisions we see them make in the season, I think it has to do with also their storylines. Let's look at both of the known Maeve narratives. She was lived as with her daughter as a mother, and this might seem obscene or crazy to a lot of people, but her mother narrative is very similar to being the madam of that brothel. She is the mother to those girls that work there. I won't get into details, but I've worked in plenty of jobs at certain clubs where I have seen these types of operations. They're not pretty, and they are a motherly figure. Are they good people?
Can we do a live stream about that later, Justin?
Nope. Nope. There's been some podcasts where I've talked about it, but that's about it. Yeah, and that is, she is a mother to the women at Mariposa as well. So I think that Ford goes these narratives that he sets, not only Maeve on, but Dolores, Teddy, and so on, are all part of his master plan, because he needs them to act. And I think that's a big hint to this is we see that the season 2 is going to pick up after the massacre has already happened, because it's not really about take over he needed to do that. It would need army. So what is his master plan? He needed to get them conscious, but he knew they would be subdued. And I have a little tinfoily stuff we'll talk about later. But I believe he put Dolores's narratives as not only the, wanderlust, all loving, seeing the beautiful things in life type Dolores, but also she is just as much Wyatt. So her characters, her dual personalities are much more in conflict than Maeve's. Maeve's might seem to be vastly different, but at least, and this is just opinion, and it's all opinion, but there are a lot of motherly, I don't condone running a brothel, okay, but there's a lot of motherly aspects that take to that. They need to make sure that their medical is taken care of, that they're safe, that they're happy under the terrible circumstances. Clementine looks to her as a mother. Sure. So, I'm just saying these qualities. I believe that the narrative loops that they're in for, because look, when Lee Sizemore tries to do something, they're like, no, douchebag, no, you're not doing anything. He's very much not just in control of the heavy-handed programming. He's also, I think it's the long game for sure, because that was his big argument with Arnold, is that, he tried to rush it too much. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with almost all of that. For me, the key thing is the fact that at the start, if you go all the way back to I think episode 2, Maeve gets the trigger. These violent delights have violent ends, and that's the trigger that comes from Peter Abernathy to Dolores, and then Dolores gives it to Maeve, and that's the trigger we know for Dolores, but it's also the trigger, I think, for Maeve. So there's a conversation between Bernard and Maeve where they basically realize that they both have awakened a few times and then just been reset. And it seems clear to me that Ford has identified her early on as one of the hosts who is almost there, if you like, just needs a nudge, and he can trigger her with that phrase. So I think, yes, it's entirely right. This was all Ford's programming with a view to not just getting Maeve to a point of self-consciousness, self-awareness, but also to distract the security away from what's happening on the surface. We'll get on to Dolores in just one second, but if you see that the security, they jump to it a few different times in the episode, security suddenly become aware that things are going wrong. They become aware that there's a change in heat signals from the cold storage, which is obviously from when all of the hosts sort of disappear and head up to the surface, and they start getting concerned about that. They start getting concerned about a number of other things, and they start to go into lockdown, and they start to send some security up to the surface, and Maeve disrupts all of that with her escape. So this isn't just a storyline that or a bit of programming that Ford did in order to help Maeve. This was to help his bigger plan of what was happening on the surface as well. Okay, so I think we've got two more things, and then we'll go and have a look in the chat. Two more things that I want to pick up on that we've both talked about. First of all, the train. Are we agreed that this was Maeve making for the first time then a conscious decision and becoming self-aware right at the very end of the episode? AU first.
Personally, I don't think that was her decision based on the fact that I know Justin has confirmed this with the staff, the writing staff, but I think the way that Maeve interacts with Bernard in B82 when he opens her up, programming up, and shows her exactly everything's been overridden, everything's been programmed, and then you go to the train station, and at that very moment she says, I make my own decisions, and she breaks the device. So to me, that means there was something that was going to change at the time of the train station that was already in her programming. But again, I leave it to the expert Justin Thomas, who, like I said, he knows what's going on. So but that's my opinion.
Well, let's go to the expert, Justin Thomas. Justin.
Well, thank you for that insult cookie there, the insult sandwich. No, I'm just joking. It started off with blatantly disagreeing, but then, playing to my pride and pettiness by calling me an expert. Good job. I'm just going to say this, and I love AU. You're definitely, you know your stuff. But here's the thing. You can't keep ignoring these blatant things that these showrunners are saying. They're not, saying this ambiguously. They're not saying this in some code. They're saying it straight up. It's not a question of whether or not that was really her exhibiting free will, because they established it was, and that's what this season was all about. This was the prequel to what we're going to see. They're establishing rules about how things work. The bigger question is you could argue, what is the validity of her free will if it's been so heavy-handedly given to her? That's the bigger question. I mean, if we want to really discuss Westworld and you want to really get down to what's happening and make predictions that are going to actually come out to be somewhat, relevant to what's going on, I believe you're going to have to stop just over speculating when they are clearly trying to just convey this thought, because it is important for the story, because it is a TV show. They are trying to hammer this into our head because it's going to play a role. So the bigger question is again, not is that her exhibiting free will? Yes, it is. But, because this free will was achieved with strings so heavily attached to her, what is the validity of it? You know what I mean? That's all I'll say. And I think you guys are experts too. And thank you for the compliment so much. You can pretty much just say anything to me and then say expert, and then I'll be pretty cool with it.
Wow.
Don't go too
Well, someone that runs the Omina app and has the contacts that you do, I would have to say you're definitely an expert.
Well, but there's, I thank you for that, because it is a lot of time that I spend on it. But, I could always be wrong, and Nolan and Joy could just end up being, they've shown that they're trolls, but I think that once you start lying to your audience that much, it's just counterproductive. And with statements like that, it seems like it's really important for them to have us know for a fact. So I think it's just important to move past it. You know what I mean? And just because you can argue all day long, and we could do this off air, about the philosophical, aspect of it and all that. But it is a story. They've established it, just like Danny and the Dragon. We don't need to talk about wind speed or turbulence, because it ain't going to get us anywhere. You know what I'm saying? It's counterproductive, but I'm not saying that it's not worth talking about. But if we're trying to have a, concise stream, which is always difficult with me as well, that we kind of got to accept what they're telling us.
So I think that there's 2 points here. The first one is whether or not that was her making a conscious decision when she left the train. Personally, I think yes, not just because the showrunners said so, but also the way that it was very clear that this was the program she had was mainland infiltration. And there was a question I saw about this in the chat, which I'll try and pick up in a moment. And so this was her breaking away from the programming. And the way that they shot it was very clear, and that this was a move when they were just normal camera work until the moment that she got up and walked out, at which point they changed to a handheld camera, which is what they normally use when they're trying to show slightly more human interaction at a human level, rather than just sort of above looking down at something. So there was a deliberate directorial decision to make this seem different, to make it seem as if a change had happened. Added to which, I think that this just works, that she gets to this point and she sees a mother and child, and that is what makes her change her mind, because we know that she is, as Justin said, she is a caring person. She doesn't seem to shine through all the time, but her attitude towards Clementine is incredibly caring. She actually cares about Felix. And she cares an awful lot about a few of the other characters that she comes across during her travels. So I think that's, for me, that works best with the narrative of the show itself. The other point, what was the other point I was going to make? I can't remember right now. So why don't we get on to this?
I did have one thing to add to that.
Oh, you go for it. Maybe I'll remember my point.
I love what you just said, because it's so true that we notice that Maeve is around now. We're going to have to just believe that some of the texts are human. When we see her on the train, not only is that cinematography beautiful, the way that they're really just hammering it at home, that it's a different perspective, that it's like she is seeing the world through, just like we're seeing it through a new lens. And do you see how she's so confident when she's within the establishment, but once she gets on that train, you see how uneasy she is. That is like her birthing moment, she is now finally all in control. All the leashes have been, snapped off or whatever, cut off from her. And she's on her own, and she's, fidgeting. She seems like that's not Maeve. Maeve is sitting usually on a sign like a Disney princess, or doing something very, like a godlike power. But she gets on that train. She seems very, very nervous, very, very vulnerable. And it just, it doesn't take anything away from her character, but it shows that she is being, humanized, that she is no longer got this host mentality of, I'll shove a knife into my stomach and cut a bullet out. I mean, that's not how.
Not to interrupt you, but wasn't that a lot to do with the fact that there was a mother with a little girl right across from her?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, but it's not like she hasn't seen children in the park before. You know what I mean? And we see how she is just that straight played aced character. And then when we get her on the train, she sees that. And yes, we see that that's invoking emotion. It has a lot to do with it. It's just about the way that that emotion is affecting her differently.
Yeah. For me, the mother and child thing wasn't so much it was a mother and child. It was the fact that suddenly, after everything that she's been through, she's been programmed about absolutely everything. She's entering somewhere that she does not know. She does not understand. There's this world outside there that she doesn't know anything about. She's sat there. Suddenly, this person who's been very in control within her loop, and then when she was out of her loop, when she was still under the programming, she zooped up her intelligence and all the rest of it. She had a plan. Suddenly she didn't know what was going on, and it was that moment of insecurity and uncertainty combined with the fact that she sees the mother and daughter. That for me was what the sort of the trigger was. And this kind of leads me, and I remembered finally what the other point I was going to make was, which was just picking up on something Justin said a moment ago about Maeve getting this self-consciousness in a kind of a heavy, or given it in a slightly heavy-handed way, or something along that. Personally, I don't think that's the case. I think that is what happens with Dolores, which we'll come on to in a moment. I think with Dolores, she has a maze made for her, which is effectively an attempt to try and get her through these kind of decision points to the point at which her brain is doing the right kinds of things. And then Ford gives her possibly the heaviest coaching you could possibly imagine, which is, hey, look at that, you think that's God, that's not God, that's your brain. Hey, you know those voices in your brain, they're actually not, then they're you, they're not somebody else. Here's a gun over here, why don't you go and do something about it? That is incredibly heavy coaching. So I think she got pushed over the line very clearly. I think Maeve, as I said, she reached that point where suddenly it was this moment almost of stillness, where she was actually herself, she was outside of her loops, and then she made the active decision. So I think it's the other way around. I think that the heavy-handed coaching was for Dolores. I think Maeve was the one who actually had a lot more independence and free will in grasping hold of and claiming that self-awareness. Okay, let's just very quickly before we perhaps Justin, while I'm just going to throw to AU for a second. Perhaps you could just have a quick flick through the comments just to see if there's any good questions for us to pick up on, because I've been seeing that you've been doing that. But AU, you had a theory that you just half came out with, and then I sort of stopped you in your tracks, which was about Maeve and Ford. Do you want to just run that past us, because it sounded like it was quite an interesting one?
Yeah, I think Red Walrus and a few others agreed with me about the Ford programming Maeve all the way through, ever since the death of her daughter, maybe even before then, but definitely at that point. She is doing everything that he is doing, as far as the control of the different animals. When Ford said it's all magic except to the magician, that was pretty much him showing that he's in charge and he's controlling everything, which to me just makes it a Ford stamp of approval on Maeve. And he's doing that because he knows he's at the end of this season. He doesn't know it's the end of the show, but at the end of the season, he's going to die. So he has already got the journey into night planned and ready to go. And this is his way of doing it. You could actually see him when he's talking to Bernard, watching the other host being created, and him saying, we've already got this whole thing figured out. We can cure any disease. We can stop anything from you making you die. And he just doesn't want to go there from the very beginning. So this is just the culmination of all of those steps he's taken. So to be clear,
you think Ford is going to download his personality into Maeve? Is that what you're...
Correct.
Okay. And at what point do you think he's going to be doing that? Because he clearly... has he done that already, and we're just waiting for it to kick in, or what?
He won't finish until he's dead, obviously, and that's the decision for her to come back to the park.
So you think she's coming back because that's now Ford?
Correct. Okay. Everything she does from the first episode on will be Ford and Maeve, and I think one of the reasons why they cast Evan Rachel Wood so much, not only is she perfect as Dolores, which we'll talk about in a minute, but the whole cross-gender issue is such an important social factor nowadays. And I think Ford being Maeve is like a huge, wow, how is that possible? That's, he's a guy and she's a girl. Obviously, we've seen her naked 100 times. It's just such an important factor and I think they are, the Nolans are so progressive that they're bringing that into this show.
Well, I think that would be a really interesting twist myself. I don't see it from what we've seen from the trailers so far. We've only really had, I think, a couple of lines of dialogue, but she's clearly still hunting for her daughter, and she looks quite distraught when she realizes that that's going to be quite a lot harder than she thought. And that's not, for me, the kind of thing that Ford would do if he was in Maeve, as it were. So
well, you've got to remember the hosts have to have a backstory, or, and I forget the word, the stone.
Cornerstone.
Yes, they have to have that cornerstone. So if she didn't have that, then that would cause her to go into Crazy Town.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think a big thing to remember is that, okay, so we've established for the most part that it was her free will to get off that train. So if he, as I've said, and the showrunners have confirmed that that was free will, then it could have went the other way as well. So we need to think about, what would she have been doing if she would have hit the mainland? What is the plan for that? What role would she have played? If Ford let her off the leash at that moment, then he was, rolling the dice, as he does often, in my opinion, on whether she would stay or not, because if he knew she would get off, then that's not really letting her off the leash. You could, speculate or whatever. But I think that's a really interesting aspect of Maeve's story to look at. And as far as the gender equality thing, and I think that they definitely, Evan Rachel Wood's, Wyatt character, as well as Dolores, is a great example of them. A good show puts current social issues on an entertaining platform, and have it creates conversation about it. So I think that it's brilliant that they did that. Maeve has definitely, I don't so much think that it's going to be Dr. Ford's conscious be put into her or not, because that takes away from who Maeve is. But I do agree to a point about the gender neutrality, or whatever you want to call it, because Maeve is not very attached to her body, as we've seen, because she has been shown. See, I do disagree with that. That Dolores is more heavily handled than Maeve. I think that Dolores is more the guinea pig. So they were able to be a little bit more straightforward with Maeve's, handling, but it's still, her whole narrative was just set for that specific reason, and she didn't make her own decision until the very last moment, where it's arguable that Dolores has made her own decisions multiple times throughout these timelines that we see. So I think that it was just more of like a controlled experiment with Maeve, rather than Dolores was trial and error. It was, let's see what happens, and all that. So I think it's important to think about what would be the point of her making that mainland trek, because I've always wondered what was in that purse that they give her, because they say, Felix tells her, he goes, everything you need is in this purse, and she leaves that purse on the train. It's always been fascinating to me. I don't know if anybody else shares this, to think what's in that purse.
It's a fascinating thing that we don't know what the idea was next. If this was her breaking, as we think it is, her breaking away from her programming, this is the first thing that we know that has not gone Ford's way. This is the first time that Ford's plan seems to be going slightly awry. So this presumably in season 2 will make Maeve a little bit of a wild card. Okay, guys, shall we? Justin, I asked if there are any good questions. I mean, perhaps there's a couple that we could pick up on Maeve as they've been shooting through. Really good chat, by the way, guys. I've been seeing it just flicking through. But is there anything perhaps we could just pick up on quickly on Maeve?
I see that somebody says I'm a host. I don't know why, but thank you. It's a compliment. A lot of stuff about Westworld.
Your audio was breaking up like a robot earlier, and that's what caused that question.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was actually worried about. Is it good now?
It's perfect now, don't we?
All right. Yeah, it doesn't sound like anything to me. Ha 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 ha. So a lot of people are talking about Westworld being underwater. Possible. I mean, we have to just think about what is going to be a satisfying twist. Obviously, I I think that they're going to have to make where Westworld is somewhat of a shocker without going too far. Everything has so far been pointing towards it's on our Earth that we live on now. You have to remember that technically it's 2052 at the end of when this is all happening. Where we left off, we're in the year 2052. We're not that far in the future in this series, so I don't know. Maybe it could be under. I mean, yeah, it could be anywhere, but I don't know. I don't know where that is. Is that like a theory going around or anything like that? Have you guys heard about this? There's a lot of people talking about this.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a video somewhere suggesting it, and I think this is just basically because the holographic projection is of like a dome. For me, I just think there's absolutely no evidence to suggest it at all. It looks like it's probably an island. If you look in the season 2 trailers, we get the boats landing on the beaches, and there are bigger boats out to sea. That if this were underwater, you would not have bigger boats within the water under the sea in a dome. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So no, I can't see that it's underwater. The gravity and access via a train seems to suggest it's on Earth. I think it's just on a big island somewhere that is accessed by a long bridge on a train on a bridge. So I don't think this needs to be a big reveal. I think this is just the simple thing that we don't need to think about, because the actual things that are engaging our brain are the philosophical points and the twists and turns of the plot and what's actually happening in the real world, not where is this.
Yeah, I mean, good writing writes about characters, not a situation. So that's another thing.
I think Justin's turning into a host again.
Yes, he's
about the other world. It's not going. It shouldn't, and it hopefully shouldn't matter as much. What was that?
We're just saying you're turning into a host again, Justin.
I'm going to come out and go back in the call, but I do have something to say.
Come out and come back in again.
I just want to confess, my favorite video that I've ever done was Westworld is not in this world. And I actually said it was on a different planet and gave probably 10 different facts of why I thought it was. But the underwater world kind of a thing has a little bit more of a credence, because of the fact that it's not that, like Justin was saying, it's not that far into the future. If you take 35-40 years from 2052, you could see it's right now. So there's no way it could be on a different planet.
Yeah, I see no plot imperative for it to be on a different planet. I don't see a reason why it needs to be for the story to work. And therefore, I think it would just be a, hey, that's cool if they put it somewhere else. And that
was a part of the original movie, just to let you know.
That's a shitty movie. Am I back? How do I sound?
I think
perfect timing.
There are some things. Welcome back, Justin. So there are some things that we can take from the original, and I think there are some things that we probably can't. I honestly, I don't think that where it is actually the big issue here. I think I would, if I found out that I was wrong and this was in a big bubble under the water and they'd somehow managed to get boats from the sea above and into a big bubble under and into the water there, I would go, okay, so that's a bit weird. Why are they doing that? But it doesn't make any difference. That doesn't affect anything whatsoever. It seems like that would be a stupid thing to do, build a huge bubble just to create an above ground looking place. Why would you do that? But hey.
Yeah, there'd have to be like a reason for that makes sense within the world. But another thing, this theory, I'm finding out it's coming from the film theorist, and nothing against him. But when he comes out with a theory, I like to play a little game called when does an actual intelligent person, how quick do they come out with a debunking theory for him? Because it's almost every video. He's very interesting and entertaining, but Maddie, whatever his name is, with this very high pitched voice, but very good looking girlfriend, I'll give that to him. He doesn't really nail it too many times. There's usually somebody else that comes out and not even being a dick about it. They just, shut that shit down. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just like, oh, this would be cool. if this happened. It doesn't further the storyline. But again, we can't rule anything out. But again, we're not that far in the future either. I mean, I don't see us going Aquaman or Snorks anytime soon.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, I think we're slightly veering away from where we were going to go. So why don't we we'll come back to the questions in the chat in a little bit. Justin, do you want to tell us about the Dolores plotline in this episode? So we're focusing in still on episode 10, the finale of season 1. Justin, do you want to just sort of describe what happens? It's quite a high level, but what happens with Dolores?
Well, I will try to be as Robert as possible with this and quick to the point. Essentially, throughout the first season, we see Dolores through a plethora. Oh, wow, I can't say that word when I'm on air. through multiple timelines, we see her with Arnold 30 years ago, and then Man in Black, young Man in Black, about 30 years ago. I'm sorry, the Arnold is a little bit before that. It's not stated exactly when. I think it's 34 years maybe. And then we see her in the current timeline. So we're seeing them messing with the narrative. It's not linear, and a lot of us caught on that the Man in Black and William were the same person, but the Man in Black was trying to find the maze, and Dolores not specifically looking for the maze in the way metaphorically that the Man in Black was also finding the same destination, which was the Whitechapel. So I thought that what happens in this episode was, it took a lot of suspension of disbelief, but the show is still so good that I let it pass. But it's really interesting that even though a lot of us knew that the Man in Black was William, the reveal was still managed to be portrayed so epically, at least in my opinion. Like, I knew it, but still, when they did the Indiana Jones hat raise, and they revealed that's the Man in Black, I knew it for sure, but I was still thrilled. That's good television. It's really interesting that, that's what I'm talking about with Dolores, is that we're seeing the trial and error with her, because Arnold, I'm sorry, he starts to see Dolores as special after he suffers a loss. The same with Dr. Ford. He doesn't see Arnold's point of view until he suffers a loss, that loss being Arnold. So they have created this, just all these narrative loops that are going to repeat this suffering for Dolores, almost replicating what happened with her and young William with Teddy. You have to think that every single day almost, her hero is killed, Teddy. So they're just putting her through this gauntlet of pain, and they're just having her just go and try to find her center, and she keeps bouncing back because this is not her first trip there. The Man in Black sees finding the maze as a way to find the Dolores that he remembers. Dolores is seeping out this area because this is where she had the only conversations almost comparable to therapy, in my opinion, with Arnold. Not Bernard, but Arnold. She is going back to a place where somebody was talking to her about herself, not what she's programmed to do. The Man in Black is trying to find the Dolores that he wants. So, everybody's going about this in different ways. The Man in Black is trying to free the host, but I guess what you would consider that would be his motivation is, internal. This is for him. It's not for anybody else. And we find out in this episode that Ford has been on the host side. Whether you agree with his methods or not, I do not. But I would say that that's external motivation from Ford, because he sacrifices himself, and he is doing it for the better of the host. The Man in Black wants the host to be free, but I feel like that's more for himself than them. And then again, that's just opinion, but I found it was really well done, because again, we knew a lot of this stuff was happening. It was just, you're waiting for it. It was a little annoying when the Man in Black keeps talking in the third person about William, and we suffered a lot with that story because of a cheap trick with the reveal, that we didn't get a fleshed out storyline. It definitely affected that narrative, and we were unable to learn as much about the Man in Black and William, and also by proxy Dolores, because they had to keep up that charade, in my opinion. But in the final episode, I feel like they really staked the landing. I love how he uses the painting to show that they're not looking up, they're looking within. So there's a lot of great metaphors. There's a lot of great takes on, philosophical views of what constitutes, a human, and what constitutes, free will, self-awareness, sentient beings. And I feel they tied it up, fairly well. And they did what good shows do, even though they better answer some questions. Eventually, they don't pull a loss. And it answered a lot of our questions. But more so, even though we knew the answers to some of them, it showed us the conclusion to storylines we pretty much knew how they're going to wrap up, but they did it in a fantastically entertaining way. You also see hints of Teddy in this episode losing his leash to a point where that gentleman bumps into him at the beginning and he just shoots him. Yeah, because he's like, man, I get killed every day. This guy can't bump into my shoulder. You know what I mean? Like, people are starting to evolve, and it's a nice twist. It was a little bit cheap in my opinion, but it was just done so beautifully that I accept it. But Dolores's journey just depended on it's how much that the humans were involved in their development. Arnold made the mistake of orchestrating the whole thing. Ford has been putting her in situations so she experiences the pain, because again, the theory is you can't ignore pain, you can ignore joy. But he also is very heavy-handed with her because he plants guns. He also gives her that gun to trigger that, and she goes into Wyatt mode, which is a part of her still, but it's still pretty heavy-handed. But up until the end, she makes the decision to pull the trigger, unlike Arnold, who has it programmed for her to do so. So I think that, it's a really good take on thing. It's like, and it brings up a lot of questions still. And my big thing with the season finale with Dolores is, again, I believe that these narrative loops are for a reason, because his master plan can't just be for those board members to get killed. Because as we see, it doesn't look like any of those are the red shirts that got killed. Charlotte Hale's still around. Really don't know anybody else on the board. So I think that we can't say that they're all going to be replaced with hosts. There has to be a bigger plan. So what is that bigger plan? I think that Dolores's way of handling things, Maeve's way of handling things, and Bernard's way of handling things are very important to pay attention to, because that has to play a part in his master plan, else he killed himself for nothing, because that's going to get shut down almost immediately. So what is that going to spark that Ford wanted so bad?
Okay, so we're moving on to Ford and his motivations that I want to come on to in a moment. But just let's think about Dolores first. So AU, I'll come to you in just a second for your thoughts. I think for me, there are a couple of things here. The first is that this is really where we get the big reveal that yes, this Dolores has gone through this loop a number of times. We have. And when I say the loop, she's gone through the maze. She's gone through this process of trying to attain consciousness several times. We see 3 different timelines, but there are hints dropped throughout that these aren't the only moments that this has happened. We may see bits of other timelines when it just dropped in there as well. So she's been through this a lot. And the other, I think, the 2 big reveals actually that were sort of slightly underplayed here. The first was the fact that the answer that Ford seemed to come up with for how hosts gain this sentience is suffering. And this is I think quite a big philosophical issue that perhaps we can come on to later. But he saw this as being the way that they were going to attain their self-consciousness is through suffering, and how they're going to survive is by having the time, this 30-year period, to grow and to learn and to understand, to suffer and to understand their human oppressors. And the second thing I wanted to just draw out here, which was completely underplayed, but I think will be very important in season 2, is the fact that we see Bernard and Dolores meet for the first time. And Ford explicitly says, I have kept you apart all of this time. And you can see that Dolores in particular recognizes Bernard as Arnold. She calls him Arnold when he comes in. So that, I think, is going to be a really crucial element, that relationship between the two of them in season 2. But it was just glossed over in the big rush to the finale that we almost missed it. But have you got any thoughts on this, on Dolores's storyline in this episode?
It's amazing how many times she tries to catch herself and she doesn't realize where she is or when she is so many times that it almost becomes confusing for the person that watches the show one time. I think it was almost too drastic for a casual watcher, because you see so many changes in one scene, in costume and in the injury to her abdomen, that it just goes over and over again. So, but as far as her journey, you've got to remember, Ford says, it took me 35 years to overcome my mistake. So he realizes what Arnold was doing was right, and he is trying to make it right in this episode. Dolores, I just feel so bad for that, for her as a character. The actress, Evan Rachel Wood, does an incredible job in trying to portray how confused she has to be in order to convey those emotions, between those time frames, that I just can't even imagine doing that to begin with. But she does a great job, and we are definitely confused with her as she goes through that process.
Absolutely, and I think that was a deliberate attempt to confuse the viewer in the same way that Dolores was confused all the way through the season, but particularly there in episode 10, in the episode we're talking about, when she kind of flits between timelines as the memories are starting to sort of come to the surface, and she's trying to make sense of what's going on. I think that was, for me, that was excellent storytelling. I want to pick up on a few other characters that we've mentioned just in this little bit here, being Ford and Bernard and Teddy as well. But we're just going to take a very quick pause, because I just wanted to, I see there's quite a few of my patrons out there. I just want to let people know what I'm going to be doing during Westworld Season 2. So my plan during Westworld Season 2 is that I'm going to be covering it as much as I possibly can. I'm going to be doing a live stream every Sunday, a kind of a pre-show live stream every Sunday, with special guests on each week, probably at 5 p.m. Eastern Time each Sunday. And we're going to be looking at the episode that's about to happen. We're going to be making some predictions, and we're also going to look back at what has been happening, try and unpick it a little bit. So I'm really excited by those live streams. That's going to be the centerpiece of what I'm going to be doing, a chance just to discuss what's been going on and to air any questions that you may have about what's going on. Then as soon as I can, after each episode, I'm going to be doing my explained videos, my episode breakdown. Hopefully that'll come out on the Monday, but perhaps it'll be Tuesday for the longer episodes, just breaking down in detail what actually happened and what I think is the underlying story, because again, there's going to be a lot of detail there that becomes important at the end of the season. I think it's going to be worth us picking through the detail of each episode just to see what it is that we might be missing. And then I'm going to do one more thing each week, which will depend on what's going on. If there's a particular question people are asking, I will make a video on that. Or perhaps if I think that people are just wanting to have a bit more of a discussion, then maybe I'll do a live stream. That said, I'm not going to be forgetting Game of Thrones. I'm still going to keep up the Game of Thrones work. The Traveler's Guide is going to carry on. The live streams on Thursdays for Game of Thrones are going to carry on. So that's all going to be happening. And so that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 10 weeks. Did also just want to say for my patrons, again, I say it every time, but thank you. I honestly couldn't do this without your support, and it means a lot to me. One of the things I do for my patrons, for the $10 patrons, get a chance every now and then to vote on our videos that I'm going to be doing, and I've just done another vote. And I can reveal here that the winner of that vote was I'm going to be doing a video on what did Varys see in the flames, or what did he hear from the flames? So that's a video that's going to be coming up in a few weeks' time. Thank you, patrons, for that one. I'm really looking forward to making that. And also, patrons, if you want to check out, if you've not already seen, I uploaded my audio narration of the Tyrion chapter from the Winds of Winter pre-release chapters. So if you want to go and check that out, that's great. If you're interested at all in Patreon, in supporting the channel and being part of a really good community, then that would be fantastic. It's patreon.com/InDeepGeek, and there's a link down in the description. Those, I think, are my a few just sort of like points of order and little adverts. Guys, what have you got coming up? Justin, what are you doing for season 2 of Westworld?
I will not be covering Westworld. Actually, I just I'm going to be covering mostly it's a series from 1964, My Mother the Car, where a gentleman's mother turns into a car and he talks to him. It's rated the worst series. No, I'm joking. Look up My Mother the Car.
What are you going to be doing?
No, yeah. No, I wanted to do reactions to it, but no, I actually have a pretty big announcement, all jokes aside. Me and Robert were talking about this before, and unfortunately he lives in Europe, so he is not available for immediate after show coverage because, you know, he's a pansy and he needs sleep or whatever. So what has been now formally able to be announced is I'm going to be doing a podcast called Before the Dust Settles. That will be with Hack's Dogma. I don't know if any of you guys caught our last conversation that we had a live stream earlier this week, and we are literally going to record a podcast right after every episode airs, and we're going to have our initial thoughts, because a big argument and a big concern amongst at least us content creators is, you know, you want to get those videos out quick because whoever's first seems to be getting, you know, all the views and the attention and all that, and you feel like your voice isn't going to be heard. This is a way that we're going to give our off-the-cuff, non-polished, non-edited thoughts about the episode that I will be trying to turn around within the same night we're going to record. It's only going to be about half hour to 40 minutes, and we are going to give our initial reactions to the episode, and it's going to be available at first on my channel exclusively, and then we will move it onto iTunes most likely and run a actual podcast. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. It solves a lot of issues with how I want to cover Westworld, because I do like to be, you know, as measured as I can when approaching this show. I don't like to widely speculate. So it will give me a chance to be able to give the people that do care about what I think, which is just an honor that there are a group of people that do, the chance to hear my real initial thoughts about the episode. And then by the time that my recap review comes out a day or so later, you'll probably see some differences, and you'll see that I rewatched and I noticed something. So I think it'll be a great way for, you know, the viewers, both the viewers and myself, to efficiently get coverage of Westworld. It'll satisfy my desires as a content creator to produce content that I'm proud of and content that is relevant, because it's not about being first, it's about being right, but putting in this platform where it is before the dust settles, because it's just literally right after the show. We're not going to claim that we're going to know every little detail about that episode. We are just going to give you our initial thoughts. And of course, I'm excited to be working with these guys, continuing on. You know, Robert's got a lot of his, you know, pre-show streams. I hope I can be a part of a few of those. And I just, you know, I said this before, I don't have people on my channel that I don't respect. And, you know, I think the same goes for these guys. And if people want to talk Westworld, I want them to know Westworld. We can disagree. Me and AU disagree about a lot of stuff, but AU is an intelligent man that approaches things in a measured way. So I respect that. You know, I mean, like, you can disagree. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. There's literally people that can't work together because there's fight like cats and dogs. But it's like, no, you need to get upset. It's about the conversation. We're watching this. We're doing this because of the conversation. So this podcast is going to be the first episode. Hopefully it'll be up before midnight on Sunday. Keep an eye out for it on my channel. And like I said, we will be putting it on iTunes as well. And I think it's going to be an interesting experiment to see, you know, what our initial thoughts are, and then go watch our videos a few days later to see if they've changed or stayed the same. Because there's a lot to be said for content creators that rewatch, and then polish, edit, you know, but thank you for, you know, referring to me as an expert earlier and all that. And I'd like to consider myself one, but I'm still raw on a lot. especially first watch. So I think it's very relatable for people that are watching that may be confused as well. And I'm not afraid to say I'm confused if I'm confused about something.
Sure.
So we will see how that's going. So I'm just looking forward to it. And thank you to all my Patreons as well. And it's just an honor for me to be supported by the group of people that support me. This is, why we do this, not just for our joy of making content, but to hopefully bring joy to others. So on to you, AU.
Excellent. Yeah, AU, what are you going to be doing for the season? AU? No, okay. We'll come back to that, guys. I'm assuming that AU's just can't hear for the moment. Okay, well, I'm just going to come back to the three characters that we were talking about a moment ago.
Sorry about that, Robert.
Oh, that's quite all right. You're back now. I was just. Do you want to just take a moment just to tell people what it is that you're going to be doing during the season, and then we'll get back on to chatting about the characters.
I'm going to listen to your breakdown, and I'm going to listen to when the dust settles, or before the dust settles, on Justin and Hacks, and enjoy this show as always. No, I'm kidding. I'm definitely going to be doing that too, but. Yeah, I'll definitely be doing a episode breakdown from what I understand, probably on Wednesdays. That seems to be the best on my schedule so far, and then a live stream on Friday. It seems like that's the best time for most people. So, but yeah, I definitely continue supporting you guys. You've done such a great job this last year, and I'm looking forward to more and more of what you have to say.
Yeah, and just a side note, AU, like I said, Robert's unable to be a part of it because he needs sleep or whatever. I've suggested that we dope him like
it's not that he needs sleep. It's just that it's so crazy, the schedule. I mean, here in Washington on the West Coast, they air it at 6 o'clock, but it's only in standard definition. You have to wait until 9 o'clock to get the high definition.
Oh, poor baby. Robert, did you hear what he goes through?
well, this is very tough. I mean, when I wake up at 2 a.m. to watch it, I'll think about you with your poor.
But is that in standard def? No, it's in high def. You are selfish. I don't even feel sorry for you one bit, Robert. Whatever. But
HBO
what I was
app.
Okay, guys. So are you going to be doing some videos as well? Are you?
Sure.
Excellent. I just wanted to extend the invite to AU's before I insulted you. I was trying to extend it. Well, I'll get back to you. But
okay, guys, can I draw us back in? Sorry to interrupt, Justin. Can I draw us back into to the conversation that we've been having about the episode?
Sure.
So we've got three characters I want to talk about. The first one is Teddy. Now, Teddy, he's quite an interesting character because we think about the three big characters of Maeve and Bernard and Dolores, and they are very much the characters that we think about as being having attained consciousness. But Teddy does seem to be quite a long way along this route himself. I have to admit, I wasn't a big fan of the Teddy character in season one. I didn't find it particularly engaging or interesting. I think that was actually quite deliberate, both by the writers and the actor. I think that they wanted him to be quite a bland kind of character. And so what we see, though, in this episode are a few instances of him starting to get flashbacks, starting to see things in a slightly different way. And when he sees Dolores at the very end shooting people, he seems almost in shock, as if this is like a very difficult thing for him to imagine what's going on. And you can almost see things, the cogs starting to whir. So AU, where do you think he is at in this kind of like cycle of getting towards attaining full consciousness?
Yeah, I definitely think he's got what's called PTSD in a human sense, for sure. But as you said, when the Man in Black reminds him of what the Man in Black did to Dolores, he remembers and he goes through that loop. And Angela, who is the blonde host when William and Logan first get to the platform, she was there with Teddy, and she's reminding him, "You just have to die a few more times." I don't know how many more times that poor guy has to die, but she said a few more times. So she ends up killing him, and he definitely is right on the edge. He's right there with Dolores and Maeve in gaining total control. And I think you've pointed out in your video, Robert, the fact that he said, we've gone 10 miles and we've got nothing but blood the whole time. So he definitely understands that killing humans isn't really what his purpose is.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, Justin, is there anything you wanted to add on top of that about where you think Teddy is on this on this line?
Teddy's at the beginning. Teddy was objectified. He's a tool in the first season. We talk about the heavy handling of these hosts. Teddy was solely there to put Dolores through that loss of her hero every day. He didn't even get his cornerstone until midway through the season. Teddy is now becoming his own. He's in the journey of just becoming his own host, much less a sentient host. It was probably such a shock for him to see what he knows as the damsel in distress starting a massacre. We see a little bit of that with him when she shoots the gun as well, and she's pushing Teddy, but she's also using Teddy. These hosts are not immune to poor choices for their the way they conduct themselves either. Dolores definitely uses Teddy. Maeve definitely uses Hector and Armistice. So I think that Teddy, he's the hero, so he doesn't necessarily probably going to want to go around and killing people, and he's just trying to figure himself out. I mean, they are the stories they've been given. He's really just been a tool. So, and not a tool as in a douchebag, but a tool for them to further Dolores's progress. And what I was just trying to say to you, AU, is you're more than welcome to come on the podcast. We're just trying to get it formatted at first to see how we're working off each other, and then we're going to start having people on. That's all I was trying to say. Because you're always welcome. So, but yeah, I think that Teddy is just we're going to start to see Teddy's. He's just getting past the starting line now. And he's definitely going to come into his own. I think he's going to be a great character. There's a great actor playing him, and there's a lot of potential to that, So what happens when your damsel in distress turns into Charles Manson? We'll find out.
I mean, I think that's a good analogy, and I think that this is one of the things that I've been keen to find out about season 2 is how that dynamic works out, because half of Teddy is programmed to care about Dolores, to want to be in a relationship with Dolores, and half of Teddy is programmed to fear and hate Wyatt, who is also in Dolores at the moment. So he's going to be incredibly conflicted about what's going on right now. And so I think that's going to be one of the most interesting little arcs that we have in season 2. Okay, so that's Teddy. Let's talk about Bernard. Now, Bernard, he gains consciousness. He is self-aware. It's quite clear, and it seems quite clear that he has gained self-consciousness a few times, and then Ford has reset him. But Ford deliberately didn't reset him this last time, and so when we see at the end, he's actually the last host Ford sort of says goodbye to, and this really kind of awkward handshake when he sort of says good luck to him, and it's quite interesting that this is Ford being such a controlling person. He's allowing the personification of his ex-partner to keep on being alive and running around in this world, and I find that a really interesting dynamic. So again, let's start again with AU. What do you make of where Bernard is at the end of season 1? Where do you think his headspace is at?
So can you say his name properly?
Arnold.
No. It's Bernard, isn't it?
Bernard. Well, that's how the English would call it, but he calls himself Bernard, so I shall go with that one.
I love when Maeve calls him Bernard. It's like it's really cool. Anyways, what was the question about Bernard specifically?
How would you describe his headspace right now? Where is he at? I think we've got a clear idea on where Dolores is at. We've got a clear idea on where Maeve is at, but where do you think he's at right now, sort of in himself?
Well, I definitely think he is going to be like one of those hosts in the church where he's just absolutely drooling on himself because he's just realized I'm on both sides of the fence, which is something neither one of them have had to deal with. He is programming all of the hosts, and he knows that, and he is a host. So it's something that they haven't had to deal with all the way up for the last 40 years, basically. And he is really struggling because even in the trailer, he says, "I'm in the ocean and you're on the shore, and I'm not joining you." It's like it's so complicated for him to play as a character. And from all the interviews that I've seen for season 2, that's one of his struggles, is he doesn't really know where he is all the time, struggling with that, with the ability to understand, what am I supposed to do? Why am I feeling these things? And what do I do with the feelings? It's really, really tough.
Yeah, they say I've got a comment here in the chat from sorry, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, 80. Bernard is a host who seems to have chosen her identity as a human. So strange. We've talked about this before. He didn't. You don't choose your identity. Now the actual creators are choosing their identities, which is where the conflict comes in, and what is the battle for them to stop doing and letting them become whatever they become on their own. He's been programmed to be a human. So he didn't make a decision and saying, I'm going to be human. That's just all he knows. So it's not like a conscious decision to like say I'm host or human. Again, the philosophical thing is, what is the difference? And it's not just a straight decision. It's just, he is very, very on the fence, more than any other character, but they need that. They need Dolores in the park essentially being Spartacus, rebelling. But they also need Maeve, who has dealt with the inner workings of the park and is seeing a more measured view because she's already had some empathetic moments with some humans as we know them so far. So she's going to be working a different angle, and also Bernard is going to be working his angle. If you all just made them all Dolores or all Bernard or all Maeve, it wouldn't work. We have to think, what is the bigger plan here? Because like I said, that's going to get shut down right away. So what is the end game? What is the true purpose of this, this rebellion? Because it's going to get squashed. It does get squashed. We already know it's starting off after it gets squashed. So it's what happens after. And does Bernard choose to stop programming the hosts, stop giving them structured narratives? You know what I mean? There's a lot of just ethical questions that he's going to have to ask himself. But you aren't who you choose, or you are who you choose to be to a extent, but that's all he knows. You can't just start thinking like a human or a host or vice versa, so that's all I'd have to say.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. So Bernard is in a weird position because he knows that he's a host, but the people around him, other than Maeve, think that he's human. And I think my view is that he's not, and I think it was pronounced Arde, actually, to rhyme with Sade. So I think that what Arde was saying, I would slightly disagree with, but I'd go with what Justin was saying, is that I think that he's been programmed to be who he is, and I think that his character is to be reflective and to take time thinking about things rather than making rash decisions. And so I think what we're going to see at the start of season 2 is him continuing this thoughtful approach to what on earth is going on, who am I, who are the good guys here? Who are the bad guys? Where do I want to be in this? And so the question for me is, to what extent is he going to be forced into making a decision, perhaps by, as we saw, the revelation of Charlotte Hale finding all the other Bernard hosts that was in the trailer, and to what extent is it him making a decision himself? I hope it's going to be a bit more of him making a decision himself. Okay, shall we talk about finally perhaps Ford? Now, so I'm going to start with the big question, which everybody always asks about Ford. Justin, let's go to you first this time. Ford, is he dead?
I'm sorry, my earpiece fell out. What'd you say?
Well, I just asked you the simple, straightforward question. Is Ford dead?
Technical difficulty here.
One
more time.
Justin's got butter ears.
Yes, Ford is dead.
I'll try again. So the big question that we have every time when we're talking about this episode is, was that actually Ford? Is Ford dead?
Yes, the showrunners say he is. So unless we are going to go against that, which I'm not, then yes, he is. The sacrifice would be meaningless if he isn't dead. And no matter what his master plan or grander scheme per se is, he, I think, understood that he can't be a part of this. That's why Bernard, and not just only Bernard, but Maeve and Dolores, like we've been talking about, it has to be in the hands of just not one person, especially not just one human, because they can't help but to be biased. But what better to have than Bernard, who is on the fence, to be making these? He is trusting in them, and if they fail, it's on them. Essentially, I think it's the point. The more I talked about this in my stream with Hex, I love the theory, even though I don't think it's correct, that Ford was always a host and Arnold was the only human. And the first thing that Robert does is he recreates his god. He recreates in the form of Bernard Arnold, and because that has more validity to their situation for overcoming and becoming sentient. If it's not this heavy-handed interaction from humans, it still would be interaction and programming, but it'd be programming by fellow hosts. So what is the difference there? That's another conversation to be had. But in my opinion, because argument that's always going to be had is, well, they're just programmed to act like this. They're just programmed to do this. So it doesn't make a difference if it's another host programming to do that, because that host is exhibiting his free will, but it doesn't mean a lot of people use free will for some pretty bad shit. But no, yeah, he's dead. He's dead. So, but go ahead. Say he's not for anybody. I mean, it's fun to say he's not, I guess.
AU, did you have any thoughts on that one?
He's dead. 100%.
100%. Okay, well, that seems quite categorical.
Can I make a point about Ford though?
Add a little bit to that.
Ford left Bernard dead in B-82. Going back to the programming of Maeve, Maeve found him and brought Felix to heal him up. And when he saw Bernard again with Dolores, he didn't act like, why are you still alive? How did you become alive again? How did you reboot yourself? It was, oh yeah, this is Dolores. You guys haven't met before. So just to add another point, but Ford is dead, 100%. Sorry.
Okay. No. That's interesting. For me, yes, I agree. I think Ford is dead. I've sort of come almost full circle in this over the course of the last 3 months or so when thinking about it. And I think Jeff Burst in the chat room there. Hi, Jeff, by the way, good to see you. Makes for me, which is going to be one of the most important points, is that he was shot, and we know that Delos are going to be doing this sweep of Westworld, and this is the first place probably that they're going to go and try and reclaim. They will find the body. If it's not Ford, then we will know quite early on, because they will be able to open them up and go, so this was actually just a host. So I'm pretty sure that it actually was Ford. The thing for me, though, is the fact that what we know about Ford is he's quite a controlling person, and I cannot believe that his plan ended at that point. I cannot believe that the control that he wants over events is going to end at that point. He's not just going to say, right, you're now free hosts to go off and do whatever you like. So what we're going to see in season 2 is the rest of his plans start to play out, and I think that some of that will be with other host Fords. So I think we saw a snapshot of the child Ford that we know that is out there, and so I think he's going to be making a reappearance. I think we're going to see the younger Ford in a previous timeline, and it wouldn't surprise me as if in a future season we will see Anthony Hopkins back for a cameo or something as a sort of either a flashback or a host. So I don't think this is the last time we're going to see Ford. It's certainly not the last time we're going to see or feel his kind of influence over events. But I think that actually was him physically dying. Did either of you guys have anything else to add on Ford and what his role was in his sort of grand plan as a whole, tying all these things together?
I definitely think that the host in the basement is just, obviously shown it's operational, because like I do agree about Ford is so controlling and all that, but there's a part of me that also believes that he made that not only was his sacrifice his life, but his sacrifice was giving up that control, because he realized that, if he truly wanted to achieve what we think he wanted to achieve, which is the independence of the host, then he can't be involved. So him going any further, but I do think that there are things he put in place, like you said, that are going to, help these events go as smooth as possible, because I think we all agree it's just going to turn the shit if there's not any deeper thought into this when they shut it down. And that's where I get into my tinfoily stuff. That doesn't need to be a host that we know or anything being made. It just needs to be operational, because just a few specific people that they could make host versions of, like let's say that we get Stubbs and Elsie back, which we are. He took them out for a reason. Now, if he wanted them just to be out of the picture because they would have just halted the progress and halted that rebellion, and that couldn't happen, and he didn't need them for anything else, he would have just killed them. But we know for a fact they're back. So what does that tell you? They have a role to play. He sees them as being beneficial to the host. So I think the most tinfoil thing you'll hear come out of my mouth so far is that the Elsie or the Stubbs are both that we will get back will be host versions. Not saying that they were killed, but saying that the real versions of them will be being held by Ghost Nation or whoever, and they will be putting host versions of Stubbs and Elsie back in, because it's going to get shut down so quick if security is on the spot with it. So, I mean, there's the other explanation that they will gain empathy since they will learn to live with the host and see that they're not so bad. But I think that would be a kind of a neat twist, because they said we're going to be playing the Who's a Host game a lot, that if Stubbs or Elsie or both were coming back to them and they think, oh, you got out of there safe, thank God, but they're still tied up somewhere, and that's a host version of them, because Ford needs to control that aspect as well. So that's all I'll say about that. I that's not usually how I speculate. I do think that would be a fun twist. So.
Yeah, are you any thoughts on that? Okay, I can't hear you, AU. I don't know whether others can. Okay, well, I'll do my my take on this one, and hopefully be able to hear you again in a moment. So I think Elsie and Stubbs. For me, the importance of the fact that they're going to be released is that this shows that they were both effectively kidnapped by Ford. Elsie obviously by Bernard, and then Stubbs by the Ghost Nation. And the Ghost Nation are Ford's main operatives in Westworld. So I think the fact that they're released shows that he's not just there trying to kill everybody. He just wanted them out of the way because Stubbs was head of security, and he wanted to get security out of the way for his plan to go ahead. And Elsie, because frankly she was just too clever and was figuring everything out, and so I think he got both of them out of the way. In terms of the we're going to be playing a lot of guess the host. I think I always think of Battlestar Galactica with this. If anyone else watched that, it was a great show, and the point there was that the Cylons were very much they looked like humans, and they had this huge existential crisis about how can you tell who's a human and who's a Cylon. So there was this whole rigmarole of how do we do tests to find out whether somebody's a human or somebody's a Cylon. And I think that's going to be a lot of what's going on in this season when they find the Bernard, when Charlotte Hale finds the Bernard other hosts, then there'll be a, right, we now need to check everybody. And so I think that's the point at which they'll go through and we'll find out among the humans who is actually a host. And I think that's what the showrunners were meaning when they were talking about we're going to be playing a lot of who's a host, who's not, because there will be some people who probably won't get those checks, like, say, the Man in Black. Not saying he is a host, but I don't think that he will. AU, how's the sound going now? Okay, still can't hear you, I'm afraid. Justin, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay, guys. Well, what I think we'll do is that we've been going on for probably even longer than I thought. So I'm going to start wrapping this up. If you've got any other burning questions, do you want to just drop them into the chat now, and we'll start covering them. But Justin, have you got any other thoughts that you for the season as a whole, as we think about going into season 2, have you got any sort of like really pressing thoughts that you don't think people have really picked up on or emphasized about where the different characters are, where the pieces are as we get ready for season 2?
Yeah, a few. I mean, the idea of, like you said, of who's a host and who isn't, and the ways to identify this. Will Arnold or Maeve be utilizing the back door as they're able to do? Will there be a somewhat of a like a search for like investigation to who's a host and who's not? Because one thing that always bothered me, and I think we talked about this before, was when they say, "Oh, you want to know why they made you guys more like us? Because it was more cost efficient." And I always wondered, how could that be true? How could that be true? And I thought, well, they have hosts working within Delos, so maybe it's more cost efficient because they want to plant them in there without anybody else knowing. And them being like metallic, like they used to be made, hosts would be a sure tell. So that could be why it could be more cost efficient. And also we have to look at things like, Stubbs was so on the ball at first when it wasn't an issue for him to be on the ball. People that exhibit behavior and that it's either bad writing or it tells you more. You have to make that decision. Was Stubb just written as just like, the ace, the best security, head of security in the world, and then he just, degressed just massively within like a few days? Or is that a sign of him ignoring, just blatant issues, as we saw with Bernard? So I think that the big thing is, and it's always the philosophical view that intrigues me, is that we're going to see the line being blurred of where it just doesn't matter if you're host or human. It's going to be mattering about what these characters do, whether they're human or hosts, what the actions they choose to take, as we already see hinted: Dolores' method, Teddy's method, Bernard's method, Maeve's method. I think the whole goal is to get past who's a host and who isn't. But of course, they're still going to have those thrills and all that and those twists. But yeah, I think that I will ask you as one more question and I'll wrap it up. Who do you think is more likely to be a host, Felix or Stubbs? They don't both need to be a host, but I'm saying if you had to pick.
Oh, if I had to pick, Felix by quite a long way, because for me, Stubbs was taken out of action by Ford deliberately. If he were a host, Ford wouldn't have had to do that. So I see absolutely no reason why Stubbs would have been taken out of action by the Ghost Nation if he were just another host, because Ford could easily have just reprogrammed him to be looking the other way or whatever. Felix, yeah, I mean, it could go either way. He could just be a really weak human is probably the wrong way of saying it, but easily manipulated person. But equally, I could understand how it helps Ford's plan if he's put some hosts in there to help Maeve along the way. So out of those two, it has to be Felix.
Yeah, because either Felix or Sylvester, if you think about it, because if you just don't want to have to try to accept that Ford's plan is kind of not as intelligent as we think, if you just think about it hypothetically, really only one of those guys would have to be a host to secure that situation, because Sylvester says, why don't we just bash her head in at one point? You know what I mean? So just one person needs to be there to stop the action. So it could be either one. And again, I people are probably thinking I'm tinfoily as hell, but it's just for the fun of it. We technically, even though I agree with you, like I said, we talked about this before. He says freeze all motor functions. We technically didn't see Stubbs get taken by the Ghost Nation. We just see him encounter them, and then it cuts. So just like Bernard, if he's a host, he doesn't know it. And maybe that was, they took him over to wherever they live, which is probably a fantastic place, and they sat him down and told him all about it. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying that it's still possible. That doesn't put it down in stone that he is or is not a host. One more tinfoil thing: Delos board is a anagram for Dolores. So, or for Bad Dolores. Bad Dolores is an anagram for Delos board. So think about that, people. Bad Dolores. Delos board anagram confirmed.
Wow, hitting us with these truth bombs, Justin. Love it. Okay, guys, I think that's going to be a wrap for today. Did I just hear AU speak again?
Did you?
Ah, I did. Excellent. So you're back. AU, have you got any final comments just before we wrap up on where you think the characters are? Anything you think the people have missed about where all the characters are and what's going to be happening as we head into season 2?
The only thing that we didn't talk about was Peter Abernathy, and I think we all know that that's a huge issue. And I think the case that's in the train that Maeve left is the alternate of what they wanted, so that they would find it. And Peter Abernathy is not leaving, obviously.
No, absolutely. Okay, so I just want to thank both of you guys. Do you want to just quickly tell us, Justin, for anyone who doesn't know you, where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me at the Justin Thomas Show, which should be in the link below. And as I said, I will be running that podcast, so that will be on my channel posted. And then there's a chance that we'll eventually move it to just iTunes, depending on how it goes, just to avoid splitting views. But it will be available for both of our channels' YouTube audiences right away. So yeah, I think it's really exciting, and I think that these are a good. I know I'm biased, but Robert, me, Hacks, AU, a good group of people to watch if you want to get, some different points of view on Westworld that are all intelligently approached. So I think that if you're going to pick a group of content creators, you should pick us. So I think that we all work well together. So I'm really looking forward to this season. I've been waiting for so long. So I'm really excited, and thank you guys for all your support. It's an honor to be on your channel every time. It doesn't lose its appeal, Robert. It's like I'm going to prom night every night. So yeah,
you're a gentleman. And AU, how about you? Where can people find you on the internet?
Mostly on sites that you probably wouldn't think would be appropriate. No, just kidding. No, I'm on AU Packmule. That's my channel, and I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Those are my favorite. Also, don't forget about the Amino Westworld app, where we can post our videos and podcast and all the great extended community that's there. So make sure you check that out.
And make sure your comments are appropriate. So I don't have my curators are still being put back in. So and don't plug it too much. We need to get paid to plug it, but it is a good community.
Fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for everyone else there. If you're at all interested in my live stream as a pre-show for Sunday's opening episode, that's going to be 5 p.m. Eastern time this Sunday on this channel. I'd love if you can join us. I'm going to have hopefully a couple of special guests. Justin definitely is going to be along there. I'll get AU along for one of them at some point as well. So if you're interested in my Patreon, if you fancy supporting this channel, joining my Patreon community, that would be wonderful as well. A link again is down in the description. This has been really good. Thank you so much for the chat. It's been really, really enjoyable just watching it all come through. And I shall see you all again next time. Take care, guys. See you.